Ian Murray.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr Betts, or Sir Clive. It's great to see you in the chair. And if the honourable gentleman will just allow me to call him the honourable member for Berwickshire, it might save a little bit of time rather than running through his entirety. This is a strange debate, Mr Betts, because we have two parties, the Conservatives and the SNP, arguing over this issue, when actually they're both culpable for why we're here in the first place. And the social security system has been completely and utterly discredited since 2010 by a deliberate narrative from the coalition government at that time that welfare was a bad thing. They completely changed the narrative in this place and indeed in the country from social security as a safety net to welfare being bad. And that is part of the problem and part of the narrative issue that we have today. And I think it's worth putting on record at the start of my remarks that between 1997 and 2010, the previous Labour government created a system that lifted millions of pensioners out of poverty and millions of children out of poverty, and we should be incredibly proud of that. And since then, since 2010, most of that has gone backwards in the name of austerity, which has been a political choice rather than a necessity. And before Conservative members pop up, if they so wish to pop up and go on about the employment statistics, which are very much welcome, most of that poverty, most of the decline in terms of poverty numbers are in work poverty. It's people actually in work and not able to pay their wage. I'm happy to, but I'll do it once because.
It's a very good thing, though, that there are less children now in workless households than ever before. That's a good thing, isn't it?
Well, it's a fantastic thing, but it's a very bad thing that most of those children are now back in poverty when they weren't before. And that's something that we all have to make nice and soft. Welfare is social security, Mr Betts, is a very sensitive subject, and I think we have to be very careful about the kind of language that we use. And I'd like to reflect on what the Smith Commission done, because the Smith Commission, as a response to the 2014 independence referendum, put in place a commission that allowed all the parties to come together to find some kind of consensus around what the next stage of devolution should be in that devolution journey to the Scottish Parliament. And I'm so glad that members across the House now bestow the virtues of Section 24, 25 and 26 of the Scotland Act, because it was as a result of my Amendment 31 to the Scotland Bill in 2015-16, when at the dispatch box it was Labour that was promoting changes to the Scotland Bill, while the Conservatives and the SNP argued about the minutiae of what wasn't there, while we were determined to put amendments down to put stuff into the bill that could have been there. And those amendments that went through in the House of Lords to give Scotland essentially the power to create its own social security system. The Scottish Government can top up any devolved benefit and indeed top up any reserve benefit and create a new benefit in any devolved area. And that's incredibly important. And that's why it's so frustrating that these devolved powers have been delayed, because I'm delighted that the Honourable Member for Berwickshire mentioned the WASPI issue, because this is a key thing about how this whole issue has been dealt with. Very quickly.
He will understand the difficulty and complexity of delivering a combined social security system, one that has to interact with a department that is putting roadblocks in the way of some of the flexibilities and changes that the Scottish Government are looking to achieve. So what could he outline an area where the Scottish Government could have gone quicker, such as the Social Security Bill? Could the passage of that have been done quicker? Any area that he thinks could have allowed this to move any quicker than the present way that it's been done?
Murray.
Mr Betts, I admit I'm not an expert on social security and wouldn't claim to be, and I'm going to look forward to hearing from the Minister in terms of what he's got to respond to that. But isn't it interesting that the SNP spokesperson for social security was telling everyone in 2014 you could set up an entirely new state in 18 months, and yet have delayed this not only twice but 3 times in 2016 and 2018 and 2019 on benefits that they claimed had to be in the bill and should have been devolved immediately, and then they would have been able to deal with it. I won't, because the Chair has already said we've only got 5 minutes. So I did want to mention the WASPI issue, because WASPI women in my constituency are absolutely beside themselves at this issue in terms of not being resolved. Both parties and both governments in Scotland and the UK are now completely culpable for robbing WASPI women of the pensions that they've worked hard to be able to achieve. And Scotland could take a different course. Scotland could use the powers that are at their disposal to take a different course, but they refuse to do so because they'd rather create that grievance than actually creating the issue. And Mr Betts, I'll just finish with this, because it's important that the people of Scotland do know this. We have an inhumane welfare system at the moment across the UK. Scotland can take a different choice. Scotland can create its own welfare system. The UK Government have created a situation which means that Scotland has the ability to do something different. The SNP Scottish Government refuse to do so. so. They've delayed it till 2024, 8 years after the passage of the bill, 8 years after the passage of the bill, and at that time disabled people and WASPy women in Scotland in particular are suffering, and the SNP government should hang their head in shame.